I don't know about you, but I hate pain. I hate hurting myself. I think everybody does hate pain. It's something that is by nature unpleasant. But when you think about it, pain can actually be one of the greatest blessings that we receive from God. And you just think about that. You ever reach out and pet a strange dog only to be bit? Well, that pain will help you remember that lesson that you learned for many years after it. It's very likely you'll never reach out and pet that dog again, but you probably won't be petting any other strange dogs. It will keep you safe. It'll keep you from being bit again. When I was 4 years old, I can remember playing a game and standing on my tricycle, and the tricycle went out from underneath me, and the resulting fall on the concrete was so hard that I actually broke my arm in 2 places. I don't remember ever standing on a tricycle after that. The pain from that lesson taught me that that wasn't a prudent thing. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 3 says this, a prudent man sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. The person that has to take the same pain over and over just isn't learning his lesson. I like Ralph Parlett in the University of Hard Knocks. He calls these painful lessons bumps. And he talks about the fact that there are some needful bumps in life. That first time you learn a lesson, there are certain things that there's no reason for us to know that the thing that we're doing could cause pain. But once we do it the first time, we hopefully will learn. A child that reaches out and touches a hot stove will learn never to touch a hot stove again. That pain has taught him the lesson. But then Ralph Parlett also talked about the needless knocks. And those needless knocks or needless bumps were the ones that we continued to have to suffer. It's like a child reaching out and touching a hot stove and crying from the pain, but walking right back up to it the next day and touching that same hot stove and crying from the pain that results from it, and then just doing it over and over. Well, even a child is smarter than to do that unless there's something wrong with that child. But how many adults experience the same pain day in, day out, and yet they keep going back for more? Think of the person with an addiction to drugs or to alcohol. That hangover the next morning tells you you've drank too much. That's not a good idea. Those withdrawal symptoms that you receive from becoming addicted to drugs are telling you that these are not good for you. The wise person will do something about it, but the fool will just, as the proverb says, keep going and they'll suffer for it. Pain is something that God gives to us as a guide or as something that will temper us from making mistakes, or at least from making the same mistake more than one time. So many times we read of things in the Bible that we want to do that the Bible says is sin. We wonder, well, why is that sin? Why does God call that sin? And very often it's because that activity has a penalty with it. And he would protect us from that penalty. And so he forbids certain activities, certain things that will be harmful to us or to other people. And there's a pain usually associated with that type of destructive action. And again, the prudent man will see that. He'll learn from that. Hopefully he'll learn from it just by reading God's word, but if not, hopefully he'll learn it from the pain that results from the wrong action. But so many people don't. You look at credit card abuse. I don't know about you, but that's something that I've really tried to keep an eye on through the years. That first time that you overspend on your credit card and you can't pay it back the next month, well, it comes with a pretty hefty interest rate, doesn't it? And sometimes it will take several months to get that completely paid off. And the fact is that the credit card companies, once they have you paying interest, every charge you make after that immediately starts accruing interest. And so it becomes very difficult to pay that off to where you don't have to pay interest anymore. It takes discipline. But hopefully the pain from that lesson will cause you to get that discipline. Our parents hopefully have a proper type of discipline that they used on us when we were growing up. I remember when I was about 4 years old, it seemed like I learned a lot of lessons at 4, but I can remember at 4 years old standing on a chair in the living room, and my mom told me to get down from that chair, and I told her I didn't have to if I didn't want to. And Mom took care of that particular incident right on the spot. Lightning fast reflexes, that woman. and it was painful, let me tell you. But I don't remember ever talking back to my mother or my father after that incident. I don't remember before either, but I clearly remembered that incident and the resulting pain that occurred. And let me tell you, it wasn't bad. She slapped my fresh face for saying that. It only lasted a moment or two, but I remembered it for the rest of my life. Still, at the age of 65, 60 years later, can remember that. What is it about our modern society that is so opposed to pain when it comes to discipline? I realize that modern day psychologists say that any type of discipline that brings pain is somehow abusive, and it can be if it's taken too far, but anything that's taken too far can cause problems, can't it? A car is a nice thing to have. Driving from one point to another is much faster than walking, but you start driving at 100 miles an hour and you become a danger. And so there are speed limits. There are certain things that hopefully, if the government doesn't have a limit on it, we're smart enough to see there's a certain speed that's safe and there's a certain speed that's dangerous. And very often we learn that from having made the mistake and maybe had a little pain to go along with it. Well, the discipline that parents must exercise upon their children as they're growing up is something that's very important. It doesn't need to be abusive, but it needs to be sufficient to where the child, when they're thinking about repeating that bad behavior, weighs the pleasure they think they might get from that bad behavior, stealing a cookie, and the pain that might result if they get caught getting a spanking. And a good parent will know how to exercise that discipline. Why? Because they love their child, and their child needs to become self-disciplining at some point, or they'll grow up into an adult that has no discipline, and eventually society will have to discipline that adult that didn't get the proper discipline when they were growing up as a child. I think we can all see that, but it's surprising how many people are opposed to any type of discipline that involves pain. You can tell the difference between a parent who has no problem giving their child a spanking if that child's actions have warranted a spanking, and one who has not disciplined them properly. Just by going to Walmart, you can tell the difference between those two parents, can't you? One child will sit in a cart, and if they're told to stop doing something, they'll typically stop doing it. But the other child, the one who does not receive proper discipline, you can usually hear from several aisles over, just from the racket that they're making, or that their parents are making, because their parents think that yelling or speaking hatefully is a proper type of discipline, a more loving discipline than giving them a little slap on the hand or a little tap on the seat of the pants from time to time. Proper discipline is something that's very good. As a matter of fact, it's a blessing from God. When we think about bites and bruises and bumps and all the different painful things that we experience in life, nearly every time we have something that's painful, there's a lesson to be learned if we'll just open our eyes and our mind long enough to think about what that lesson is. And again, it's usually pretty obvious. You touch a hot stove, it burns, lesson learned. You're not going to touch a hot stove because that's going to be painful. But again, there's far too many times in our lives where we're experiencing pain over and over, and we don't realize that we're the source of that pain. We're the cause of that pain. A lot of people just will rail against God for their hard life, for the difficult things that they're experiencing, for the pain that they're experiencing, when so often the pain that they're experiencing is coming from activities that God has forbidden because He knows that they'll cause pain. How many people are in relationships that are unpleasant because one or the other persons involved in that relationship don't have a proper discipline. They're not acting correctly, and because of that, they're causing pain on the other person. And yet very often you'll see people in that relationship just continue to stay in that relationship and maybe even compound it by getting married to that person, and then they've got a lifetime of pain to look forward to. Pain is something that will help us, whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual, whether it's emotional. Pain is something that will help us to see that our activities or our actions are not good, and will hopefully help us to stop doing those things that cause pain. So here's the question for you. Do you have pain in your life? Is it something that is needful? You're learning it for the first time and you're not going to do it again? Or is it a recurring pain that's happening over and over and over because you're simply not learning your lesson? I realize that there are certain types of pain that come from outside of our own activities that have nothing to do with anything that we have deserved or caused, but it's just because somebody else's actions are destructive. That's again another part of pain that helps us to see that that type of person should not be permitted to continue their destructive behavior. But if you're experiencing pain in your life from one source or another, stand back and analyze it. Is it something I can do something about? I realize that some people have illnesses that are chronic, that they didn't bring upon themselves, but they just have it to deal with, and so they must deal with it as best they can. I'm not talking about that type of pain, but the pain that can be avoided, the pain that can be absolutely controlled by adjusting our actions. That's something we need to think about. And it's especially true when it comes to our relationship with God. There are so many people that have just drifted farther and farther and farther away from God, to the point where God's really not in their life, other than maybe to throw up a quick prayer asking Him to help you in some area, but you're really not interested in following Him or following His direction. And so your life just gets to the point where it's out of control and there's more and more pain. That's the point we need to catch ourselves, to think about why we're experiencing the unpleasant things that we're experiencing in our life, and see if it's something that we're the cause of. And if that's so, we need to do something about it. If your relationship with God isn't good, you need to do something about it. You're probably already experiencing a lot of pain that's absolutely unnecessary, and that your loving God does not want you to have to go through. But like a loving parent, He'll allow you to go through that pain, and He might even discipline you from time to time in a painful way to get you to stop that destructive behavior, because He does love you. He loved you enough to allow Jesus to die on the cross, His only Son to die on the cross, so that you wouldn't have to experience a lifetime, an eternity of separation from Him. And obviously the most painful thing that anyone will ever have to suffer. If you have pain in your life, you need to be thankful to God for that, because pain is a blessing from God. It lets us see when our activity, when our behavior is something that is destructive, and that we need to stop doing so that we can stop experiencing that pain. Well, that's the lesson for today. Let me know what you think about that, and I appreciate your watching today. I hope this is something that helps, and I hope we'll see you next time.